just had in there, that this is really, really isolated, trivial, erudite dialogue about something that's extremely remote.
No.
On the other hand, I don't think so. And there's no question that my whole venture into the Indian scene in the last 10 years or so has been from a Westerner's perspective. I can't be Indian no matter what kind of clothes I wear. You know, there's no. Yeah. Well, it's like the only warm weather clothes I have now, you know, are from India. But it's just that way. And so this talk will be from a Westerner's perspective. A Westerner that grew up as a person in Michigan whose parents were farmers and not predisposed to go to college or anything like that. So this is my own perspective. But I think it is helpful in terms of just an elemental approach toward collaboration. And it's probably abstraction on a totally different kind of level. Rather than seeing collaboration by another composer and choreographer who you may or may not know, and see how they work with dancers and each other. This is something else entirely. I found it fascinating. Anyway, well, taking Bill Moulton's wonderful cue, I'm going to read a good portion of what I have to say today, and it's a darn good thing I wrote it down because I wouldn't remember any of it. But I will improvise a little bit. I realized I left out the "why did I go?" and "why was I interested?" portion, which may be the only interesting thing. I started listening to Indian music, in the 60s when Ravi Shankar did his big deal. And thank God that he did. It gave us a certain perspective on Indian music that was highly technical, highly romanticized. Those of you that listen to Indian music know that Ravi's playing is, it's sort of, how can I say this, sort of analogous to, it's like Horowitz as opposed to Schnabel. There's this sense of technique and chops. It's very exciting and visceral and active. But an experience that was much more crucial for me was when I was in my second year of graduate study, I heard Frank Bennett from Yale tour with his wife. They have a thing called Carnatic Music Ensemble. There's 3 people in it. But she sang, I remember her name, she sang probably two kirtanams, two songs in that concert, and I was just totally blown away. I was just totally blown away like the water. And it was like I'd never heard Indian music before. I was experienced enough to ascertain the difference between Hindustani music, North India, and Carnatic music. And I'm not going to say, although it's my feeling, I'm not going to say that Hindustani music is of any less quality or whatever. Just that I seem to have an affinity for Carnatic music and also the Carnatic people. Frankly, I have more affinity for the people than the music. And when my brother-in-law said, after I heard told him some horror stories, he said, well, why do you want to go back to India? And I said, well, John, there's no reason at all. I want to go back to India in terms of music. I've got lots of CDs. I've got friends that sing, and I sing with them. There's no reason at all to go back for that purpose. But the people are it, and I can't explain that, so I won't. Anyway, so I sort of report on what happened to me intellectually then, while I was in India last summer, and specifically what I observed about the relationship between music and dance. What I felt was most enjoyable, though, was the kinship I felt for one composer in Madras named Rajaram. And I would encourage you, even if you're not the note-taking type, to write down some of these things, because it gets rather confusing if you haven't heard Indian names. And I don't want you to confuse the composer with the type of scale that's being used. That would not be good. Is it major or is it Stravinsky? What are we talking about? So,
You're not the sound of those.
yeah. Well, okay. Anyway, his name is Raja Ram, and Raja Ram would be the source of that. Named after the god Rama and Raja King. But anyway, his name is Raja Ram, and he's the grandson of a very famous composer, Iyengar, and he's president of Kalakshetra College of the Arts, which is in Madras. Each day for roughly 3 weeks, I observed rehearsals in the afternoon that ran about 2.5 hours. These dancers in full garb, the men's wearing their dhotis, their skirts, long shirts. The women in their saris would rehearse a very visceral and active dance for 2.5 hours in the 97-degree heat, and not complain to anyone at all about it. It was absolutely amazing. Anyway, during those rehearsals, I sat down and wrote probably quite a bit of notes about what was happening and trying to understand the drama that was taking place before me. The musicians were pretty helpful in terms of identifying the ragas and the talas, etc. And I imagine that my terminology today could be regarded as close to being accurate, at the very least. And I'm also assuming that none of you are currently collaborating with Bharatanatyam dancers, so I'll underline the fact that the materials we explore today will have to be abstracted into your own worlds. And I think it's not that hard to do. And maybe in the 3 spare minutes that we have outside of these sessions, we can talk a little bit more about it. I'd love to. I've also found that I'm learning more about my research by doing this process than the research itself, as there's some connectedness going on with me and my tradition. Anyway, Bharatanatyam, or classical South Indian dancing, is a style of dance, is strongly related to text and narrative. And for centuries it was performed by temple prostitutes. And toward the beginning of the 20th century, this woman named Rukmini Devi actually was trained as a ballerina. She studied with someone from the Bolshoi, and she was quite good at Western dance. But she stumbled on someone still performing Bharatanatyam, and it was very clandestine, of course, because of the British colonization of India. And she said, well, as she saw this, she said, well, I can do this, certainly. And she could. She learned it. She went under the tutelage of someone that knew Bharatanatyam and gave a concert. She was well connected. She had an Irish husband, and this fellow had a great deal of wealth and companies in South India, that is businesses, dance companies. And she presented a concert, and it sold out the joint. 2,000 people showed up to see this thing that was formerly a closet art, a folk art. Obviously, it's not folk art at all. It's highly refined classical art. But it was an outrage because people were really appreciating it. And I'm sure they're finding an affinity for it with their own culture. And the dance that they were seeing was about their religion and about their lives. And I didn't put this in this paper, but I'll insert this just because I feel like somebody's got to have some guts around here. But my feeling was when I got into India, I started to hear the ragas that I learned. I studied singing about 2 years before, about 2 years ago. And I knew maybe 15 Mela Kartarak is the main artist. And I started to hear them. I started to hear them in the machines that were there. I started to hear them in the wind. And I just heard them everywhere. And it was really weird. And I can't explain it. And I don't know what else to say, but it's rather mind-boggling. Anyway. Many of the dances are ways of addressing a specific emotion or mood. And all of the movement has a specific associative meaning, not only emotional, but in some sort of phrase or poetry, or any gesture has a specific literal meaning. These are called bhava, B-H-A-V-A. And those bhava are, really it's what the critical audience looks for. You read the papers and you see someone had a Bharatanatyam concert, they say, their bhava was excellent, or their bhava was poor. Not, there are a lot of
was wonderful, sorry, but now what means the versus the gestures?
It has to do with the connection between the movement and the text, the narrative text. The text can be abstract, such as emotion, jealousy, or heroism. Or
so when they refer to it being the bhava being what they're referring to, the community, they were highly communicative.
There's a connection, yeah. Because it's specific. You can judge these things in a very quantifiable way. Yes, I felt good when they did the happy thing. Or yes, I felt sad when they did the sad thing, or whatever it is. It's very, very, very cut and paste for them. For me, it was over my head by a long shot. But anyway, the amazing thing about this is that the music is never divorced from emotion. Which is, when I lectured at the University of Madras, the students were appalled at that concept. How could we write music for dance that didn't talk about the emotion, and the emotion first and foremost? They were furious, actually. I didn't have any explanations for that. I was educated in a conservatory. I didn't have any answers for that kind of stuff.
What did you say?
I said, I'm not sure. I said, it never occurred to me. I was very blunt. It was the only way out, and I was so tired at that point, they could see right through me. Well, really, we have something much better than emotions. I did.
We have technology.
And they have emotions. No, I did quote my teacher in graduate school, Samuel Adler, who said that music is about something deeper than emotions. And I love that. I love that. In the abstract world, that's, we can carry that around and still know that it's emotions, but not admit it. But wasn't good enough for them, So,
Do you believe that?
do I believe that? No, I think music is about emotions. And, yeah. So shoot me, but I really do. So the music of the three great saints of Carnatic or South Indian music are Tyagaraja, Dikshitar, and Shastri. This is available in virtually any textbook that refers to Bharatanatyam. And all of those saints, it's amazing. The great saints of Carnatic music lived exactly the same time as the great saints of Western European music. In 1767, 1775, and 1776 are the dates, the birthdays of those three people.
You call them saints.
They call them saints. I call them saints, yeah. I went to puja, specifically, puja is a Hindu worship service, and it was dedicated to Saint Tyagaraja, who is the greatest of the Carnatic composers. And that entire service was to Tyagaraja. Tyagaraja was thought as a realized soul, because the music was so great. Or are you addressing the fact that it referred to Mozart as a saint?
Both.
How you spell puja?
Puja, P-U-J-A. perspective. Well, the poor girl, she couldn't really sing. We'll give her a vina. So we'll give her an instrument.
You're not saying there's no secular music.
Yes, I am. In the classical tradition, classical Carmelite tradition. And it all goes back to these saints from the 18th century.
This is North Indian.
South. Anyway, but because of the integration of those elements, the social elements, the religious elements, and musical elements, it's really the only appropriate context for any theory about music and dance in South India, because they do revolve around the expression of devotion and revelations of deities through the course of time. So what we'll see is a bit of a long dance that's about another saint, Jayadeva, from the 12th century. And Jayadeva was a great poet. Well, I think I talked about that in here anyway. The piece is called Bhakta Jayadeva. And it's a dance drama as opposed to a solo dance form. Bharatanatyam is a solo dance form done by one person in a very small space. And it's a religious thing. But Rukmini Devi, this person that brought the dance dramas, or that brought Bharatanatyam out into the public, borrowed from the ballet tradition, this narrative form, yet the text, the narrative, was all taken from the Ramayana or the Bhagavad Gita. Okay? So, there's copious connections here between what we do and what they do, although few of us are involved in the narrative, strict narrative form. Yeah.
Are you going to talk about the dancer, the training of dancers with that?
I can, yeah. It's
It's as rigorous as ballet, right? I mean, the understanding that I have is that they study for at least 8 years before they even stage anything.
Yeah.
Or are on stage.
Well, what happened at the college, at College Shedra, the students come in, there's an elementary school affixed to the college, and actually the elementary school is in 2 pods. And one of the pods is untouchable, children that could not afford anything, low caste, and they just come and they live there. And it's a tremendous thing. It's just absolutely impressive. We should be so brilliant. Then in the other pod, there's the paying students, and they do take music and dance in the elementary school there. I mean, they've got it. It's a captive situation. It's wonderful. So some of these kids will grow up. The thing is, and I don't mean to talk down about the Indian people, but what happens is that the Brahmin caste, the high caste, sees it as a very elite thing to do, to send your kids off to Bharatanatyam school, especially girls. So they do. And then, they start from like 10 or 8. In Ann Arbor, Michigan, there are 4 Bharatanatyam teachers, and they have buckets and buckets of children coming in and out of their doorways. And these women work full-time jobs. Yes, yeah. But there's another woman in Detroit who actually has Indian students from India sent over, and they live with her right there in the place. So it's a guru situation. But when I hear you say rigorous, I think of how much sweat and dancing on concrete on a dance that's primarily made up of that stroke. It's got to
With the full bells on the brass bells.
Yep. Well, they don't rehearse it. Yeah, I mean, it's just very ridiculous. Well, anyway, I better get moving. We're not going to get into the music or the dance. This dance tells the story of Jayadeva. He's really the patron saint of poetry, and not patron saint in the same way that like Robert Frost is a patron. They mean saint, okay? Saint Paul or whoever. The choreography, just to give credit where credit is due, the choreography is by Srimati Krishnaveni Lakshanan. I won't refer to her name again. And she works at College Shedra. And the music, as I said before, is by Rajaram. I did not meet Srimati Lakshanan. She wasn't there when I visited. But spent a lot of time talking to Rajaram, mostly in a very confused state, frankly. you a great composer. You know, it's as if you study music composition for 6 weeks and then, called up Luciano Berio and said, tell me about your process. It's arrogant, it's just so arrogant. And I felt arrogant being there. It was difficult. Anyway, what happens in the story is that St. Jayadeva writes his poetry on leaves, which I assume was the current paper concept in the day, and a palm leaf. And the most amazing thing happens is they show a lot of the dances. Jayadeva is sitting there writing this stuff down, doing puja, and then he reflects, and then he writes. And, you get to examine his creative process of dance. It's really fascinating. Because the idea of inspiration is just what the dance is. It's just watching somebody be inspired for a long, long period of time. Well, Jayadeva exhausts himself one day after writing, and he looks at his stuff and he says, this will never do, and he erases a section of his poetry. And we know, this is one of the saints writing poetry. You shouldn't even think of it. It's like watching Bach erase a section of St. Matthew Passion. No, don't do it.
Decompose it.
He did. He decomposed the poetry, and he takes a nap. And during that moment, Krishna himself comes on the stage and reaches down onto the leaf and rewrites the notes back onto the leaf. And, what happens is just funny. It's a scream. He wakes up and he looks at his leaf and he screams out for Padmavati, his wife. He says, what did you do? I tried to erase this. I'm trying to get this right, You wrote this back, and he blames his wife. And there's this whole scene where he's just venting anger on his wife. And she goes, I don't know anything about it. I just don't know anything about it. And Padmavati, Jayadeva's wife, is very devout. And she says, there's only one solution I can see, is that the Lord has come himself and wrote this poetry back. And of course, word gets out. What a mess. It's just a total mess, because the king happens to be a poet. He's not pleased about Krishna's intervention at all. And he has it out. He has it out with Jayadeva. We can look at that real quickly. I just want to get a sort of background in terms of terminology. I'm sure you've all heard the term raga. I'm sure you've all heard the term tala. There's also an associative element called rasa. And the rasa is that emotive, that very quantifiable emotive association with the raga. Each raga has an associative rasa. The problem with the rasa is that musicians don't know about it. I was talking to my teacher, who's an exquisite singer, marvelous singer. And I said, Sharda, tell me about the rasa for Kalyani raga. And she goes, huh? She says, what? I said, and then she hung her head. That this smart aleck composer, Westerner, had asked her a question she didn't know. And she said, my father were here, he could tell you, he taught theory, but he couldn't sing. And still the thing was, singing. If you could sing, you don't even need to know theory, which, I won't bring that connection to the floor, but it's just really sad. So that I'm still in a dither about a lot of the rasa elements of this.
Can you give us just one example? I'm just wondering,
I will.
Is there a parallel movement? In other words, is there a rasa chorus?
Yeah, let's see. You mean in terms of if I do this, is there a parallel rasa for that?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
It's not like the Delcos, the Delsart thing, the grief phenomenon.
Well, the reason I'm asking is I recall, and I don't know if you can correct me about southern India, I'm not sure, but I recall that there were certainly the dancers who would memorize the talas, and they would know them as well as the tala players.
Absolutely.
So I'm assuming that if they were that intimate with music, that they might have been somehow intimate with the intention.
But don't forget that the musicians themselves may not know this.
Right. So
Yeah.
Why should we expect them to dance?
Right, exactly. each act has 5 to 8 scenes. And each scene has its own raga and its own tala. So you're changing, well, not key, but inflection of the key. All right? Because you know that the ragas have a drum underneath, and there's a set of melodic collection of pitches. And I think the best way to think of raga is not as a metaphor for mode at all, but as a melody in itself. And when you start singing ragas, you see very quickly that they're no way just 7 or 6 or 5 notes. They're a whole landscape unto
Just
themselves.
so I understand, how many scenes were in each act?
5 to 8 scenes in each act. It varied. It was not consistent. Anyway, so the tala changes as well as the raga each step of the way. And that's something that we instinctively do from one scene to the next. We don't keep the intent of the music the same, otherwise everyone gets bored. For the most part, there's exceptions. Laura Dean, Alan Nicolai, people like that use these, what I call oral backdrop kinds of textures that go on, and the movement can really change to a whole new scene dramatically without the music changing at all. And it does happen. But I think that's the exception. Anyway, so what I'm going to do is just kind of march through and show you different sections of this act and then demonstrate the ragas. I have a very sad kind of cassette tape here of the composer himself singing excerpts of each section. And I'll play it for you. It's not really wonderful fidelity, but it's a battery-driven kind of machine in South India. Anyway, the first scene of this Act 5 is what we're going to look at, and it's the scene where the king comes in and says, "Look here, you just cut that out. This dancing and singing stuff to your own ashtapadis or poetry. You cut it out. You should sing my stuff. It's every bit as good." And Jayadeva says, "Well, I'm very devoted to the Lord. I'm not sure my things are that off base." And, well, I'm not going to let
Tell us the rest of the story.
I'm not going to tell. I will. But we'll also let the composer do that too. The first scene in this act is in Sunadavinodini Raga, which is spelled Sunadavinodini. Sunadavinodini. And I play an excerpt here. If you can't get it from the tape, I'll demonstrate it really now. It's a phrase for essentially a kind of Lydian emphasis. In skipping the fifth scale degree, which is interesting, it's really quite rare to skip the fifth scale degree. But the gamma, the little flip, goes between 4 and 6. And then sa. He also skips the second scale degree on the way down. So it's sa. So you do get a sense of resolution, 3, 2, 1. But really, from a Western perspective, you go, Lydian! Okay? And Lydian with a real twist because it's not C, D, E, F sharp, G. Okay? Because it goes he's giving praise to Lord Krishna. And you'll see the gesture of the flute, which is the instrument that Krishna plays, of course. And it serves as an introduction to the whole act, as well as reestablishing Jayadeva's devotion. And we'll see if you, my personal feeling is that Lydian is a fairly optimistic kind of mode, but yet still has a kind of tension because of the sharp 4. There's 2 leading tones in Lydian, 4 to 5 and 7 to 8. What Vinny Devi did is took the solo temple dancing form and made a full dance drama, including that whole core de ballet. It's
So this is kind of part reconstruction, or part historic reference? No, this is kind of very clear. Well, is it just a story that has a historic base?
not the music. Yeah, the music is brand new.
Brand music
Yeah.
and the dancing.
The dance is brand new as well. Yeah, the dance is choreographed by Srimati Bhavani and Rajarani wrote the music. So this is all new. See, that's so interesting because we tend to think, well, this must be thousands of years old, because of our weird perspective of things. But this is brand new stuff. This is a premiere, So, but it's the form that's changing, not so much the materials.
Now, I'm curious, would most of the audience would see this, know this story?
Absolutely.
So the fact that they're retelling this, it will be the same as the story of American independence.
Probably more familiar than that. Probably much more familiar. Probably more like George Washington and the cherry tree kind of thing.
This is a devotional we should want to put in image.
Good luck. It's not. There's not something that's going to include
Last
this.
Supper or something.
Last Supper, maybe, but yeah,
St. Peter at the Gates of
which
Heaven.
isn't. No, it's not a lot.
With the writing on it. The Ten Commandments.
You said it's not around that.
But it's not from the Ramayana.
Okay.
Jayadeva is an
That's all.
actual guy, who's gained mythic proportions.
So this is not from the Mahabharata or the Ramayana.
Right. I see the divisions between religion and political history or artistic history break down here. You don't have to be particularly religious to be definition of saint is still the same, which is why we use the word, but the sociological connotation of it has changed. Well, yeah.
One thing about this. So the fable, or the story, is well known. And then the composer is also somehow being dutiful to the historic traditions of Raga and Tom.
Yeah.
So there are these fixed, this sort of fixed historic elements that pretty much direct, theme and essential quality of the work.
But you could think of like Shostakovich's Macbeth. Okay, but it's only if we were to say that Macbeth somehow for us became a religious, which for some people.
Works for me.
Okay, scene 2. The king comes in. I didn't quite catch the tape in time, but the king comes in and he jealously postures about, and he speaks at this point. He actually says words, which only happens twice in the whole evening, so it's a big deal. And as I said, the king is a composer poet. He's furious at Jayadeva's expertise. The rumor is out that Jayadeva has the Lord's actual hand on his own palm move, which is not going to look good for the king's fame. And for this section, the composer chooses the raga Mohana Kalyani. Mohana and Kalyani are both ragas, but this is a combination raga. The demonstration of the tape isn't exquisite, so go for it. There is an associative rasa for Kalyani, and it's jealousy. So it fits perfectly. Mohana, I don't know what the rasa is offhand, but so you get sa ni ga fa ni sa ni da fa ma ga ni sa. Again, very Lydian focus, except on the way up, you don't have that sharp forward. So sa ni ga fa da sa, pentatonic. It creates a kind of confusion, because you have this confidence of the pentatonic, the strength of it, and yet there's this edge, a sharp forward edge coming in. You have Jayadeva's expertise and his divine sanction on his work, and then you have this human element coming in. I think it's a brilliant choice, the Mohana Kalyani. Even the name of the raga implies this conflict of materials.
Seems to allude a little bit to Amadeus.
Right.
Divinely inspired talent.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Named talent.
I don't know. I don't have a problem with that. Well, that's a nice dinner conversation. Rough translation. Hey, you, knock it off. The tala here is still Adi tala, 8-beat cycle, but it's slower. I didn't give you very much of that, I'm sorry. In fact, that section isn't all that long. In the third scene, the king chastises Jayadeva even more for singing his own work and asks him to sing the king's songs. And Jayadeva instantly replies, his own compositions have received divine sanction. Please don't bother him. Well, the king is furious, and they get a plan. Yeah, okay, they get a plan. What they do is they take two one of them takes a palm leaf that they have, and they put them at the feet of the Lord, and they let the Lord decide. And for this section, he uses the Todi Raga, which is sa re ga ma pa da sa sa ni. You get two knees in this, two sevens. Sa ni de fa ge ri sa. So there's even more conflict and division. You don't know whether you're major or minor in our words. Okay. Anyway, this is Raga Todi, T-O-D-I, used for this. Violinist, if you're wondering who's making mistakes here, it's playing a flat two. You can tell excitement's just clearly mounting here, and it's not only that, we're getting to the end of our time. It increases in tempo here, and this is where it gets interesting. It goes to Tisra Jati Tala, which is 3 plus 2 plus 2. That means that the cycle, the rhythmic cycle, is getting longer and longer. Right? It started out with just 8, then a longer, a slower version of 8, and now a 7 that turns out to be a cycle of 14. The circle is getting wider, more intense,